Sharing. Meeting is being live streamed. Got it. Meeting is being live streamed. Got it. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good following morning. The AMA is back. Very exciting. Today is the 9th day of September, year of our Lord, 2000. Oh, we don't say that as Jews, 2021. And we are back after a summer hiatus. We're going to talk all about that. And very importantly, our new format. And I have, wait for it, a co-host, not just any co-host, Rabbi Avi. Yeah. Rabbi Avi will be joining me every week.
That's right.
Yontif, no Yontif, family, simcha, something going on, doesn't matter. Rabbi Avi will be every single week, and he understands halachically it's not a violation because the AMA is of supreme paramount importance. It's like pikuach nefesh, the AMA.
It's a mitzvah, no greater mitzvah.
Oh, friends only. Hold on, let me make a small adjustment here because it's always complicated. Copy link. Hold on. Just, oh, there we go. Friends only.
Go to your main page.
Uh-oh. It's not. What does that mean? Go to me?
Yeah.
Okay. Please forgive this interruption.
Here, probably.
Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Public.
There we go.
Now we go. Thank you, Sebastian. There we go. Facebook making our life complicated, but we have persevered. Like the Jewish people over the centuries, Rabbi Avi,
I love
we
the
have
references.
persevered.
I figured that the time has come to make this AMA kosher. So after 66 shows, it's time for a little spiritual enlightenment. That's the whole purpose.
You would like to be spiritually enlightened after watching 66 shows in a row, and I will spiritually enlighten you.
I hear you. Okay, that sounds like a plan.
Let's see, our fans are watching, Avi, our viewers. Kasha Leonardi
See if they
Chesh.
give me a thumbs up.
Hello, Kasha. Is Rabbi Avi the new Ed McMahon? We'll see. Those are big shoes. Those are big shoes to fill, Ed McMahon.
As long as I get a piece of the publisher clearing.
Yeah, or Avi will be hosting Star Search. Hi, John. Your dad is watching. Hi, Sita, and hi, Dad. So
Hey, Jerry.
shout out to Jerry.
Hey, good to see you, Jerry. Finally knock some sense into this guy. So I'm doing your work here.
Oh, Jeffrey Rolat, after a successful family meeting of the Rolats in Florida, in Boca, in his house. And I will tell you, Jeffrey told me something nice. Shout out to our good friend and good loyal viewer, Jeffrey Rolat, that Jeffrey Rolat, and listen to this, everybody, Jeffrey Rolat celebrated Rosh Hashanah with both of his parents for the first time in 65 years.
Unbelievable.
That was very moving. I heard
Beautiful,
that.
Jeffrey.
I thought that was a wonderful thing. So Shana Tova to everybody. We have a new year, a new format. Good to have you here, Avi, with me.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to a good conversation and learning new stuff with you and just having a fun time. And, virtually meeting all the people that are watching this wonderful AMA. So,
we had extensive tryouts. And
I
somehow,
just made it because the guy before me backed out at the last
somehow
second.
Avi made it, and we'll be here every week. So Avi, how was your? And before I talk, we're going to talk a little bit about Poland and how our summers were, and hopefully hear from you how your summers were. But we have a very special guest today coming up, who is a good friend, a wonderful guy, a real Jewish leader, a mensch, Doron Krakow. That's right, Doron Krakow. No, he didn't change his name for the show. And for us, his name is Doron Krakow. We will get into all of that. And he is the CEO of the JCC Association, the umbrella organization for the JCCs in North America. And he's doing an amazing job. And we are honored to have him as a partner, and he's a friend. And we're going to talk to him in a few minutes about many things, including what it's like to grow up with the name Krakow.
Amazing. Wow, that's serendipitous. you know?
Serendipitous indeed.
Okay.
Serendipitous would imply accidental. You mean that he's our guest or that his name is
That
Krakow?
is name. I mean, to have
It
the
is-
beginning of the new season, have a Krakow as a star of the Krakow.
What's more, who's more Krakow than Doron Krakow?
I don't know. We'll find out.
You know,
Right.
I would believe in serendipity. I would think that you would be more of the Hashem school of thought, that it wasn't serendipity. Doesn't serendipity just mean that Hashem did it?
I am not such a major believer in the
God.
Hashem.
Wait, I'm going to
Hashem
edit that.
is-
God.
Hashem is involved in every single decision of the world. So we can get into that. There's a big debate in Jewish philosophy, and I'm kind of,
So we have
I'm
things
on the
that
left side of that fence.
we have things, Avi on the left. There's a big change over the summer, Avi on the left. So you have things that normally happen. You know, you brush your teeth and then you know, your teeth are cleaner, normal things that man does. Then we have stuff where Hashem gets involved, which hasn't been for a few thousand years. And we have serendipity. With those are the three categories?
I don't know if we would use those terms like toothbrushing. I don't think of the original source.
The mundane. No, I'm saying is the mundane.
I think there's something called hashgacha pratit and hashgacha klalit. Is there God is watching over us in general, and God is watching over us in particular. There are people who are very into, and usually the more religious you get, the more particularistic the relationship with God and God has with the world is. And then there are those who say that it's a little more removed, saying, hey, you know, you have free will, live your life, but reward and punishment. So God is involved on that level. And then there's the third group that say, you know, God's out of the picture. He created the world and he's gone. That's rejected by traditional Judaism, whereas
I think there might be a fourth group.
Who reject the whole God idea. Okay, that's possible.
Remember, my dad's
They
watching.
believe
I
in
have to.
fairy tales that somehow this amazing world and
Right.
the bodies just came together and pow, look at us, here we are, and there's nothing
Right.
to do with the
Fools,
unmoved mover.
those
Okay.
idiots that believe in science.
Yeah.
Wait, so which of
yeah.
the three? Which of
Because
those?
there are no scientists who believe in
Which,
God.
which of the three categories that you mentioned do you belong to?
I'm always in the middle. I believe in that, you know, middle path, the golden mean. So I believe that you know, God is watching over on some level, on a national level, perhaps, when, you know, we see things that are happening on a more general level. But I don't think he helped me brush my teeth this morning. I think he programmed me, you know, and gave me the capacity in the beginning, and I've got the genes, and I've, you know, the whole computer thing that was going on. But I can't imagine that God is kind of like a puppeteer.
Right.
It doesn't work for me. But I'm probably in the minority here in the Orthodox world, which is a lot of people are into, like, I don't know, there's this weird phrase people are saying, hakol, you know, hakol tova. Everything is for good. I don't even know what that means. Well, everything is good. Like people are dying, you know, people are murdered. Everything is good. So there is this Hasidic philosophy that everything is good, that everything happens for a reason. I'm not sure I understand that either.
I never buy the everything happens for a reason thing, especially living where we live or where I live and you are
For
half
sure.
the time. It's hard to say that, especially when you're so aware of the, you know, unfathomable atrocities that happened right here. So that would also cause me a little bit to question God, but not you. I just want to give a quick shout out to Ola Konyor, who's watching.
Hey,
Our friend Ola Konyor. Ola, survivor of the toughest job in the world, also known as my assistant. Hi, Ola, we miss you, and I hope everything's good in Philadelphia, the main streets of
she's in
Philadelphia.
Philly.
So, Avi, we'll have plenty of time over the next weeks and months and years to debate the
as we have
existence-
in the past weeks, months, and years.
Exactly. So, but I wanted to be a little bit more to take it from the realm of the holy back down to earth. How was your summer?
My summer was interesting because I did, you know, I started coming back to Krakow, which was after a long break. And I also went to America to be with my mom and my stepfather. So.
And where were you in
challenging.
America?
I was in the Hamptons. I actually first went to my father in Lakewood, New Jersey. I brought my daughter to Chelet with me. So it was a meet the family kind of a summer. And we have a pretty wide spectrum there. My father's ultra Orthodox, so we kind of went into that world. And then My mother's in the Hamptons world, and that's its own.
She's less ultra
The Mark
orthodox.
Schneier world is its own.
Oh, don't
its own
put
dimension.
well, we don't want to disparage anybody. Your
No,
mom
not-
is
not during,
let's
Sarah's
not
Tshuva.
just to put her in the category of the Mark Schneier.
She's a fan. She's a fan. She loves that shul, and he's done wonderful things. So we got to spend a few weeks with the Oma, which is pretty cool. I have a 93-year-old grandmother. She's been 93 next month, I think.
She is wonderful.
And we hung out the whole time. So it was really cool. I got a chance to schmooze with her and travel through history and introduce.
So most of the
Sarah to her.
time in the Hamptons, in West
Yeah,
Hampton,
yeah.
not the Hamptons, West Hampton actually,
two
and-
weeks in West Hampton Beach.
and a little bit in the city. And your dad, did you stay over there or you just went for the day?
We stayed at my sister Chaya's. Yes, she lives in a place called Tom's River. You know, the Jews have moved to Lakewood, and then Lakewood got too small, so they're occupying.
Wait, Tom's River is now is Haredi?
Haredi.
Really?
Yeah.
Tom's River never was Haredi. I remember back in the day it was.
Now
I don't want to use the word normal, but
No.
normal.
Now it's Jackson and Tom's River, and they're moving further and further because it's cheaper than Borough Park, where they're all kind of
Right.
moving out of there. So they have this beautiful home and it's lovely.
It's
community.
fascinating how this idea of sort of you think ultra orthodox life and suburbs don't really work well because you have to walk to, the basic on a basic level, you have to walk to synagogue, right? So you can't live 3 miles away from the shul. You have to live close to the shul if you have to daven more or less every day in the shul.
They
So-
figure it out.
Interesting how
they
they do
work
that.
it out.
No, but also
every
with-
X miles, there's another shul that pops up in
Right, but
someone's
with zoning,
illegally in someone's
exactly, because with zoning regulations in a country that has laws like the US, not like pre-war Poland or stuff, you just put a shtibel like
Did I
in
say
Krakow.
synagogue? I meant a
basement.
a get together, a prayer meeting. I think is legal or something like that.
I
So
see.
They're dealing with that, and they're dealing with the
Interesting.
municipality and the relationships. I learned a little bit about that. If they're smart, then they treat they treat the community at large properly, and they don't create enmity in those communities. And if they're stupid, then it's just another place that
It's complicated. It's very complicated living in a world. Yeah, we don't have to get into all that right now. But these ultra orthodox enclaves, whether it's New Square or
Muncie,
Tom's River, Muncie,
yeah.
exactly, or are.
But I think they're doing a better job of it, and they're trying to respect. I told them, what put an American flag on your front lawn. Like, why can't you do that? Well, I don't know. I said,
I think that has its own complication, different areas in the spectrum. But anyway,
Okay.
my summer was great. Thank you for asking, Avi.
I was still in the middle of my.
I know, but we
story,
are.
and then
I know
you
you're
just
not
cut
used
me
to.
off.
I
Is
know
this how it's gonna be?
it is.
Okay.
We are ruled.
Fine.
We live. Hashem, unfortunately, for you, created a temporal universe, one which is ruled by time. So we don't want to
I
keep.
live in a
We don't want to
timeless
keep.
realm,
We
okay.
don't want to keep. We'll keep Doron waiting.
Uh-huh.
So we only have
Tell
2
me,
minutes. And we'll
Jonathan,
bring.
how was your summer?
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Baruch Hashem, my summer was very nice. Kash and I spent almost a month in the US, in New York and in Colorado. We were in the city and got to spend some time with my
Not
dad,
bad.
which was nice. And then we were out, went through Denver and spent 2 weeks in Aspen with our friend Vicky, head of our board, and of course, great fan of the AMA of the show. It was wonderful with Vicky and her daughters, and we hung out in Aspen and did a lot of fun stuff and learned. I played pickleball for the first time, which I know your mom is a big pickleball fan,
Yes.
and I love it. I have to say, I thought it was, what is this sport? Pickleball,
No,
not
it's
for me.
great.
It's great. We had some
Brilliant. It's a
great,
brilliant sport.
great pickleball sessions and a lot of hiking and walking and some good time in the mountains there. It's beautiful. Saw some friends.
Sounds
It's a
fantastic.
very, very nice place. Good to be back in Krakow. We had a nice Rosh Hashanah here. Three Rosh Hashanah seders going on not at the same time. First the little kids and family, and then the students concurrently with the rest of the community. It's a very nice Rosh Hashanah. It's good to be back here in person.
Yeah, it was a nice, a lot of shofar blowing, and a fair amount of praying and a fair amount of eating. So we got the trifecta. A little spirit, a little food. Well, Kasha's wonderful cooking, so that helped us out. So yeah, it was really nice. and very nice to be back, in Krakow, trying to find some more Jews and trying to help the ones who
Teach Torah.
are identifying and
Teach
to
Torah.
bring them closer. That's the plan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a lot of other stuff to get to that we're going to hold off. Rosh Hashanah. Do we have any New Year's resolutions? Is that goyish to the New Year's resolution, or we're allowed to have that?
It's goyish. It's goyish.
We'll have.
Do that. We do daily resolutions.
All right. I'll do my.
Like Benjamin Franklin said.
Benjamin Franklin. Okay. And talk about some changes in the JCC in terms of staffing and lots of stuff going on. But
am I getting fired? Is it a surprise
if I would do it, I wouldn't do it on air.
Okay.
So don't worry about that. No, of course not, Rabbi. Your job is secure. But now I want to bring on our guest today, our first guest in the new format. And I thought, what better guest to kick off our year than Doron Krakow, who I would have to love him, even if he was not connected to anything and he was a terrible guy, I would still love him because his name is Doron Krakow, but he is a wonderful guy. He is the president and CEO of the JCC Association of North America, which is the largest platform of Jewish engagement on the continent. He's been in charge of JCC Association for 4 years. He's done an amazing job. We work closely with them, so I can tell you that I see that firsthand. He's been a Jewish leader for 25 years. He was at JFNA before that. He was at the American Friends of Ben Gurion University. He was the national director of Young Judea. He's involved with the Israeli Scouts. He has an MBA from Cornell, studied economics. He is an amazing Jewish leader. And the question for us as we welcome him in will be to see how much the name Krakow has impacted his life and has helped him on this path. So just waiting for him to come on screen.
Oh, we hear him.
We hear him, and I think in a second we will see the room.
Jonathan, my apologies. My computer is going a little slow this morning.
Oh, there we go. There he is. Doron, how are you? No
I'm
problem.
well. Shana Tova to both of you.
Thank you.
Shana Tova. Doron, we're sorry to bombard you with our new format, but after 66 shows on my own, I brought in the rabbi.
Everybody should have a rabbi at their right hand. So I think you've made a very important and wise decision.
Well,
I'm definitely on his right.
He's definitely to my right. We'll see how that goes over the coming episodes. But it's great to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's great to see you. What was the Chag like in Krakow?
The Chag in Krakow was very nice. It's besides being a new year and back from vacation, of course, things are starting to open up again. And so we had things in person. People that were vaccinated. We're asking if people are vaccinated. If so, we had them here in person. We had three seders going on for Rosh Hashanah night, about 100 people, which is a little less than usual, but still a very nice turnout because it's, I think, 100 more than we had last year in person. So
that's fantastic.
How about Tenafly?
Tenafly was also okay, although we're back in person at Shul, which is nice, but it's sparse and masked, and it still feels like an unusual way to mark the Chag, but so much nicer to be together in person than it was last year when everybody was remote from everybody. So I'd like to think this is a sign of progress, and that 5782 will see us increasingly together in large forums again, as we've so eagerly anticipated.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about a bunch of things in your career and Jewish life, and of course the JCC Association and JCCs and their role. But we have to get Doron to the elephant in the room, which is, as somebody who's been living, next month it'll be 20 years in Krakow and has devoted a good part of his life to building Jewish life in Krakow. To sit across from Doron Krakow is something very special. Growing up with the name Krakow, were you automatically the most popular kid in school?
I wouldn't say that, but the most commonly heard line when I was introduced to somebody I hadn't met before was, Krakow, do you know that there's a city in Poland with that name?
And of course, as you told me, but it's always fascinating. People assume, in this case, wrongfully so, that of course you're from Krakow, because how could it be how could it be that somebody would be named Krakow if they didn't come from Krakow and then Ellis Island, they saw some relative Krakow and gave you the stamp, but not the case.
No, this is a story that is still got an element of mystery in it. My grandfather came to Montreal in 1909 from Kishinev, where the family name was Krikuniets. And when he arrived on these shores, there was already an uncle of his that had made it here before him that had taken the name Krakow for reasons that we never learned, because that uncle had no children, and there was nobody to whom he told the tale. So in spite of my exhaustive efforts to find out why Uncle Enoch ended up choosing the name Krakow, we only know that when my grandfather got here, he took the name of his only relative on the continent, and the rest is family history.
You know, that's one story. I have to tell you that there is the story that I've been telling people, which is that in the 17th century, a distant relative of yours, ancestor of yours, was the king of Poland for one day. And to honor your family, they gave you the name, the name Krakow, of course, because that was the kingdom of Poland, the capital of Poland back then. And your family has been Krakow royalty ever since.
The truth is, I like your story a lot better than mine. So maybe I'm just going to start going with that one.
You know, I was so excited when I spoke once at the biennial, and I remember that it was like a TED talk, and I was thinking, I was like, oh, I've got to say something clever, you know, with this. How do you pass up the opportunity? You know, it's not like it's, you know, Smith or Cohen or something. It's Krakow. It's, you know, you're the sum number of people I know named Krakow is you. So I tell Avi that I got on stage and I said, hello, my name is Jonathan. I come from Krakow, and we love JCC Association and its CEO so much that we named our city and JCC in honor of him.
Listen, you know that we have a wonderful habit in the Jewish philanthropic world of getting people to put their names onto JCCs. We rarely have a case where JCCs choose to take the name of somebody who'd never made a contribution. So once again, I feel greatly honored to be associated with such an esteemed institution.
You just haven't gotten the invoice yet, Doron. Don't worry. We'll get you. We'll get you. Doron, I'll start with you, Chris. So you studied economics, and then you went and got an MBA. How was it obvious for you? At what point did you decide that you wanted to go? Because you've had such an esteemed career in the Jewish nonprofit world in all different areas I mentioned right before you came on. What was that decision like to go into the nonprofit world?
Jonathan, it was very interesting. This is not the career I anticipated, and yet I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have experienced the career in the way it unfolded. I saw myself in the corporate world or in business. So it was economics and finance for my MBA, and I started my career at IBM doing mainframe computer systems planning. But in between my undergraduate and my MBA, the grad schools required somebody to have some work experience. So as I was looking for a job in the New York banking sector, a shaliach friend of mine, with whom I had been working in Young Judea as a club advisor to help pay the bills when I was an undergraduate student, urged me to consider becoming a regional director for Young Judea in New Jersey for this interim period. To make a long story short, I eventually weakened to his urgings and encouragement, and I took the job. And it was a wonderful experience for 2 years. I was 22 years old with some significant responsibility, but having the chance to be involved in Jewish and Zionist education and Israel engagement. And then I went for my MBA and I went to work at IBM. It became very clear early on that even if I was going to do that job well, any of 10,000 other people could do it equally well. There was nothing particularly unique about my contributions at the time to the company. And when I got a call from colleagues at Hadassah who were looking for an interim national director of Young Judea, and again, I was still in my 20s, the idea that maybe I could go someplace where I could make a unique contribution was compelling. It wasn't going to be about what anybody could do in the job. It was going to be about what I alone may be able to do in that kind of a job. And I thought that would be worth the roll of the dice. So I took a year leave of absence from IBM. I accepted the position for 1 year on a temporary basis. And thankfully, it became the first step on a journey that's now in its third decade, working in the organized Jewish community. And I'm incredibly blessed.
It's interesting, and IBM's loss is the Jewish world's gain and the world's gain. But you say something that's interesting to me, which is, I think very often when you talk to people about a career change, very often it's they weren't satisfied, they felt that something was missing. But this is not what you're saying. You're saying something coming at it really completely from the other point of view, which is fascinating to me, that you felt that you could contribute more in the Jewish world than you could at IBM. So automatically, this idea of that a part of our career is not only satisfaction and what we get from it, but automatically this idea of what you would be able to give.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that maybe that shaliach, a guy by the name of Ari Marom, by the way, with whom I've remained friendly all these years later, he either knew what he was doing or he stumbled into the idea simply because there was a job to be filled in the short term. I had an experience having an impact on the lives of young people. And that gets all up in your bones. The fact that you had a chance to alter the trajectory of people's lives for the good, for noble and idealistic purposes about Jewish peoplehood and Zionism and the future of the state of Israel, that is a kind of professional satisfaction and stimulation that is hard to replicate. I had a very nice experience working for IBM. I worked on a really good team. I was learning. I think I was on the path to have a successful career there, but something was missing in that. What was the impact that I was going to have, and what were the unique contributions that I could make? And then when offered an alternative, and by the way, I was woefully ill-equipped to become the national director of a Zionist youth movement at that stage of my life. But the opportunity, the headiness of the opportunity to take on that kind of a role and have a chance to put my imprint on the work of the movement at the time was incredibly compelling. I think over the course of a long career, we learn a great deal of humility. And I don't know if I've, ever said to you what I've said to many people. I'm not sure I've ever had a job that I would have hired myself for. I have inevitably felt underqualified for every job I've ever been in. And yet the challenge and the opportunity that each presented and the chance to grow and to evolve into somebody who could do the work effectively has been a driving force for my career, all predicated on this idea that there is greater good to be done for the Jewish world, and there isn't a better place to lend a shoulder to the wheel, so to speak.
Doron, was there something in your early upbringing that kind of was an impetus for working with youth or working in the Jewish world, that when you had that decision, the fork in the road, you kind of gravitated?
Listen, I grew up in a household of hardcore Zionists. My parents met in the 1940s in Beitar here in the United States, the revisionist Zionist youth movement. My father was a member of the Netzivut in those years that the state of Israel came into being, and they were involved in all of the things that the Irgun and its allies in the United States were doing at that time. My dad fought in the Independence War, and we lived whatever was happening in the Zionist world around the dining room and kitchen table throughout the years of my growing up. If it was happening in Israel in politics, whether it was the raid on Entebbe or the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War or the start of the Lebanon War or the Intifada, whatever it was, my dad and his crew and my mom were engaged always in argument and deliberation and chest pounding about the great deeds of the Jewish people. So I'm one of 5 children. We all got involved in Beitar as children. We all went to camp. We all went to Israel at the age of 14 for the first time. Beitar withered here, so my path took me to young Judea by the time I was in high school. But we were raised with that as the frame of reference for everything that we looked at in the world. And so it was natural, I think, to be drawn into the possibility of devoting my professional life to that. Again, natural, though I wouldn't necessarily have predicted it at the time, although looking back, seems like it was a perfectly reasonable path. nevertheless, an unusual one, I think, relative to lots of others who also undoubtedly grew up in homes that were infused with either Yiddishkeit or Jewish commitment or Zionist commitment, whatever the case may have been.
Was there ever a moment that you seriously considered making Aliyah, and are any of your siblings in Israel?
So my older brother, Dan, made Aliyah in 1974 and has been there ever since. He's now raised his 3 children, and there are 6 grandchildren, and God willing, more on the way. I think the better question, Jonathan, would have been, was there ever a moment when you weren't thinking about making Aliyah? Because I think from the time I was 15 years old, I never stopped thinking about it. I made an unsuccessful attempt right after graduating from high school. I simply wasn't ready, I would say, from an emotional maturity level. So I went and quickly came back. And I have thought about it, most days ever since. And for reasons that have more to do, I think, with family than anything else, it never happened. And in my own way, I guess I take some comfort in the idea that it never happened for my dad and mom either, in spite of the fact that I think they must have thought about it endlessly throughout their lives. But it didn't come to pass, but I can tell you with a great deal of pride that my 3 sons have all completed gap years in Israel, and my middle son made Aliyah in 2018. He served in the paratroopers and is now, we're talking about some 9 weeks away from being married in Jerusalem, where he and his fiancée Zoe are beginning the next chapter of their lives. She as an economist at the finance ministry, and he as a student, and they'll pick up their path. But we now have 1 foot firmly planted there through our son.
Wonderful. I knew he was in the army, and I knew he was in Tzanchanim. I didn't know that he'd finished. So Mazel Tov on that. That's wonderful, and the engagement.
Doron, there's a beautiful Talmudic statement that encapsulates this idea. And of course, they were in Babylonia at the time that they were talking about this, and there was always a discussion about the Jews in Israel at the time. And the statement is, I guess for modern times, they probably didn't call them Zionists then, but they said a Zionist is one who lives in Israel and one who yearns to be in Israel. Both together are part of this clan. And I think that certainly encapsulates your life and your whole family. And there are those who are physically there, and there are those whose hearts are there. And I think it sounds that way.
I like that characterization very much. And I have always believed that there is room for great Zionism and great Zionists in the diaspora, and that it is incumbent upon those of us that live and work in the diaspora to infuse the community with a sense of Zionist conviction and pride in the achievements of the modern state of Israel, and the extraordinary reality that we are privileged to live, which is to have been the first generation in 100 generations born into a world of Jewish sovereignty, and the need to make sure that people understand and appreciate the extraordinary moment that we have a chance to lead or live in, is one I think that has been under-acknowledged, and to date, leaders have been insufficiently successful at imbuing communities with the extent of pride and wonder that should come with this moment that we have.
No question. I think that it's something that always makes me a little bit sad, but maybe it's just inherently Jewish and we can't escape it, is that after these 100 generations that you speak of, we have a homeland, and the idea that it in many ways is divisive for the Jewish people that we have that, and are focused on the minutia. Should we do a better job of this? Should we be that? All of these things that we get hung up on, as opposed to taking a step back and saying, what a miracle. How this doesn't happen very often on the planet, that after 2,000 years of longing and never losing sight of something, you get that, and we can get caught up in the weeds and not take the big picture. So you're right to talk about that. But your career, I mean, now of course JCC Association, very connected to it, but I want to take your previous position before JCC Association with the American Friends of Ben Gurion University. So this is something that I guess all of us in the nonprofit world are very involved in fundraising, but this was almost, exclusively to some degree, primarily, let's say, not exclusively, a fundraising position. And I think when you first heard about you becoming the head of JCC Association, people, oh, he's an amazing fundraiser. He's an amazing fundraiser. This is besides an amazing guy and a smart guy and a mensch and all the rest of it. But, I think that you were known at a certain point as an amazing fundraiser. So I want to ask you, one, was it difficult? Did Americans know? I feel like a little bit Beersheba, it's not Hebrew University and it's not Tel Aviv, although these days I think that people know about it, but I feel like growing up, nobody really knew. Ben Gurion University of the Negev was kind of not on the front lines of what we were talking about. Was that a difficult sell for Americans? And maybe and separate question, just because I'm always interested, and I asked Mark Meaden this as well. What do you think makes a good fundraiser?
These are great questions, and I have to preface the answer by saying that I came to the idea of working with Ben Gurion University, having spent the preceding years at what was then called the United Jewish Communities, now JFNA, Jewish Federations of North America, where I headed Israel and overseas, and along the way staffed a task force on development of the Negev that introduced me to a part of the country in Israel with which I had the same very limited insight and exposure as most, let's say, American Jews have, which is we got there, right? When we traveled to Israel, we got there, we climbed the Mitzvah, we floated in the Dead Sea. If we were fortunate enough, we got to Ben Gurion's gravesite and visited the Tzrif at the Kibbutz Sde Boker. But our exposure to the Negev was limited to our ability to get back to Jerusalem or Tel Aviv by the end of the day for dinner. So we could only go so far into the south. And I was captivated by what I would call the chalutziyut, the pioneering spirit of the region, at a time where there was a great deal of cynicism, certainly among the Chilonim, among the secular Israelis in the center of the country. But in the south, I didn't experience that cynicism. What I experienced there were people who were still working on fulfilling Ben Gurion's dream for the development of the Negev, and it was captivating. So when the moment came and the opportunity to pursue this job came along, I was reluctant, but was open to it thanks to the advice of a dear friend and colleague at UJC, the late Itzik Shavit, Zichrono Livracha. There was a great fundraiser and a wonderful Zionist. And he convinced me to take a look at this position. Now, mind you, I had no experience fundraising, and I had lived much of my career thinking that the one thing I would never have anything to do with was fundraising, because in my mind, fundraising was a handout and a slick pitch, walking around saying, you've got something that I want, would you please give me some money? I've got a smooth reason for you to do it. And that struck me as disingenuous and I would say not dignified. But here was a chance to take on a friend's organization for a university, as you pointed out, that was largely unknown here in the United States, had a very limited following. And I perceived it as a chance to become the head of a revenue engine for Negev development by way of the university and academic research. And I thought on that basis, I could rationalize my way into considering taking this job, and I'd have to figure out the rest as I moved along. I discovered a couple of things about fundraising that led me to do a 180-degree turn on it. And that's not to say that I don't think there were people out there with their hands out making a slick pitch. I think there probably are. But I have come to recognize fundraising in this way. I had already spent years in young Judea working with families and parents, convincing them to send their children to programs which would provide them with tremendous satisfaction and enrichment. I had spent 5 years at UJC working on advocating with federations to increase their overseas allocations because of the impact it would have on Jews in need around the world and on evolving enterprises in the state of Israel. And I considered both of those things to be educational efforts on my part, helping people to see and understand opportunities that without an educator, they wouldn't see and understand on their own. That's what I have come to believe fundraising and resource development is, certainly from the standpoint of major gifts philanthropy, where you're dealing with people who are determined to be charitable, but who don't know about the opportunities that you may have to give them satisfaction, the return on the investment that they're looking for. And I headed a team of people whose job it was to inspire people's commitment to development of the Negev, and to a university that bore the name of the founder of the state of Israel, and yet was otherwise largely unknown. A university that was engaged in the fundamental cause of turning the university itself into a combination Oxford and Yavne in the Negev. You're talking about the magic, almost the purity of the Zionist enterprise, unfulfilled. And when you add that to the fact that most people's experience in the Negev was very much like mine had been, which was a pit stop to climb at Sadar or float in the Dead Sea, I had a chance to showcase Israel to people in ways that were like they were seeing it for the first time. Because if you plant yourself in the Negev and spend a couple of days with Mitzpeh Ramon as your base, or Sde Boker as your base, or Beersheba as your base, and then you consider a 90-minute radius in every direction to explore landscape and history and multiculturalism and boundary and border issues and collaborations and science and technology and archaeology, it was really the stuff of, I would call it the purest raw material of the Zionist movement. And I had the honor of leading the team who bore responsibility for getting the message out. That's how I came to be engaged. That's how I came to feel passionate about, it wasn't fundraising in the pure sense of the word. It was matchmaking. It was brokering the interests of philanthropy with the interests of the future of the state of Israel. And what we discovered is that it was a very short leap from people not having any idea about the place to falling in love with it. And that allowed us in a relatively short period of time to go from being an also-ran among the friends of higher education to becoming the rising star of the field.
Doron, that was so inspiring. Where do I make the check out to?
Me too.
Unbelievable.
You got me. And I lived for 7 years in the Arava at Yotvata.
Did you really?
For me, Beersheba was the north. Oh, you're going north for the day to Beersheba. And I did basic training when I was in the army, was Arad, Tel Arad. So this, Beersheba to me was a very important. I know the bus station in Beersheba better than I know just about any place I've ever spent any time in my life. But it's true, in some ways, if Beersheba was, 30 or 40 years behind the rest of Israel, then that meant the advantage to come into a situation which was the real days, like, it's like almost coming to America and in the 40s and 50s and saying we have to go and, settle people and there are tents and we need to, turn the tents into bricks. And yeah, this opportunity that you explained beautifully.
Really amazing.
All of that and then some. If it got me to get my arms around fundraising and to come to a way to understand fundraising in a manner that instilled me with a sense of pride in the work, that was the big transformation. Although I'm not entirely sure that our friends at JCC Association, my leadership doesn't feel like I haven't underperformed a bit with regard to fundraising since I've been here. So that's work that remains to be done.
I think fundraising, most people that I talk to that are good fundraisers, and when I think about it, I think it's about, you talk about being a matchmaker or the idea of being a storyteller. It's not, we always, when you start and I think most good fundraisers don't see themselves or were uncomfortable with the role. I feel like the last thing I ever want to do is ask people for anything. But when you start to have when you believe in what you're doing and you understand the importance to the Jewish people and how much pleasure it gives others, and how much satisfaction it gives others, and I think you do that switch in your head, and you understand that it's not just you're not schnoring and and asking for something.
And you've been, Jonathan, an extraordinary role model in the field. You've introduced the Jewish world to a place and a mission that they assumed didn't even exist anymore, and you've helped them to turn it into an engine for the renewal of Jewish life. By bringing compelling programs and activities, but by offering people the opportunity to find something that they would never have found on their own. And I think that ultimately comes back to another perspective on the whole fundraising thing. I think when I got into that kind of work, people would have said, the private sector, the for-profit alter ego to fundraising is sales. And I don't think that's true at all. I believe that, particularly when you're talking about major gifts philanthropy, the for-profit alter ego is high net worth private banking, because you're dealing with a category of people who have means and they need a place to park those means. The private banker's job is to say, you're going to make more money if you put some of your money with me. Here's how I'm going to invest it for you. The major gifts philanthropy officer is saying, you're determined to be philanthropic and charitable. I'm going to convince you to make a little room in your portfolio for something that I can help you to do that will give you satisfaction that you can't get anywhere else. And if you like working with me on those kinds of things, you can work with me some more. But my job is to help you to see that your investment should find expression in the work that I'm doing. And I think that the name of the game broadly in Jewish communal work, there are two kinds of fundraising work that we do. The first kind is to help people to become philanthropic or charitable, and that's the work that's being undertaken by federations and others, the annual campaigners. And then there's the work of creating the engine for the evolution of Jewish life, which is done through major philanthropy. And that's this work, making sure that philanthropists understand that we can offer them a return on their investment that they can't get anywhere else, and that there should be a little room in their portfolio for the work that we do. And again, I think you have done that brilliantly. And we are engaged in an effort here at helping philanthropy to look at JCCs and JCC Association in ways that it's never looked at us before. We have never been seen as a way to give expression to great philanthropy. And we need to turn their heads so that they not only will see it, but they will understand that it is unrivaled in its potential to alter the trajectory of Jewish life on the continent.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and I see that the wisdom of the Chochmei Krakow passed down, flowing through you, Doron. So talk about JCC Association, and you've been there 4 years, running it for 4 years. I can tell you that as somebody who's reasonably plugged into the JCC world in North America, although I'm here, and that's through other, through CEOs in the US, through board members, through people who are using the services. I think that people feel that an organization that had, that it was a complex organization and that needed certain change is undergoing those changes, and feel that I think universally, I think people feel that it's in the organization now is in good hands. So maybe talk a little bit about, just broadly, as you see the role of JCC Association, and maybe even beyond that, the importance that you see, and you do that more eloquently than anybody, of talking about the role, which you touched on a little bit, of the importance of JCCs in the fabric of 21st century North American Jewish life.
With great pleasure. First of all, I would say that, I said earlier, I would never have felt that I was qualified for any of the jobs for which I was hired, and to come into the JCC movement as CEO of the Continental umbrella organization, having never worked in a JCC, was a big leap of faith on the part of the board members who selected me for this role, and I will always be indebted to them for that. I also was entirely dismissive of the idea when it was suggested to me by a friend who said, hey, this place is looking for a CEO, you should put your hat in the ring. And I dismissed it entirely because of what I just said. I don't know anything about the field, and I was never notably impacted or impressed by it. Why would that be the right place for me? But I also mentioned earlier that I had earlier in my career a commitment to finance. And so I'm a numbers guy. And on looking at the numbers, I was convinced that this was exactly the right place for me to try to lend a hand. There are 170 JCCs across Canada and the United States. Between them, they see, or saw prior to COVID, 1.5 million people through their doors every week in person. 1.5 million people a week, 1 million of them Jews. 1 million Jews a week walking through the doors voluntarily into a Jewish setting. And not only is it a tremendous number, it is the most diverse cross-section of Jews that there is in North America. It's infancy to old age, ultra-Orthodox to completely secular, left, right, and center politically. We live in an age of personal identity, and the entire identity alphabet is walking through the doors of the JCC every single week. In fact, if you want to know what a local Jewish community looks like, sit in the lobby of the JCC for half a day on any day, and you'll have a pretty good idea of that. That makes the JCC the largest platform for Jewish engagement on the continent. If you want to do better, if you want to impact more lives, then you have to go to the place where the most lives can be found. And therefore, again, I think it's unrivaled. And I don't believe it's anywhere close. I don't think that there are any institutions that see 25% of that number collectively on a sectoral basis, on a week-to-week basis. So that is one substantial element. 500,000 of our friends and neighbors from beyond the Jewish community also intentionally choose a JCC for something each and every week that they probably could do someplace else, but they seem to prefer to do it with us for whatever reason they may have about the way we make them feel, about the quality of our programs, about how welcome they like the Jewish environment, whatever it is. It makes us the largest platform for Jewish community relations at a grassroots level of any Jewish institution on the continent. We are an embassy of the Jewish community to the wider geographies that we serve. That's also an extraordinary responsibility. And then if that weren't enough, we have 100,000 young people in our camps every summer, far and away the biggest of any institutional setting. We have 30,000 children in our early childhood education programs every year, far and away the largest. Actually, together with the reform movement, we are roughly kindred in size and scope. Pre-COVID, we employed 37,000 people, full and part-time year-round. I'm not counting seasonal staff in the summer. 37,000 people. The federation system employs about 3,000 people. Hillel employs about 2,000 people.
Wow.
We employed 37,000 people. So if you're looking at the connective tissue of Jewish life at the professional level, the people who work in JCCs at one point or another are most likely to end up filling the jobs in most Jewish communal sectors. So if you want to impact all of those sectors, again, you go to the place where there's the largest amount of critical mass. These numbers were inarguable. If you landed a spaceship from Mars and you were told that your job was to impact the Jewish community here, figure it out, your first question would be, okay, where can I find the largest number of them? That's where I'd like to go to get the work done. That was the reason why I came into this role. I have since discovered that the leadership positions, lay and professional in this field, are populated by some of the most extraordinary professionals I've ever known. I wouldn't have anticipated that. I would have said as a bit of a cynic, gee, the JCCs are kind of underperformers relative to intentional Jewish outcomes. It's probably with a bunch of apologists who are interested in other things. Turns out that's not the case at all. Some of the most passionate and talented and dedicated people that I have known in my career are doing this work. But in many cases, the dynamics that drive the day-to-day operations of a JCC sometimes are not aligned well with a commitment to intentional Jewish outcomes. There's a business to run. There's a budget to be balanced. There is work to be done. And when you look at the business model of the JCC, and here again in North America, pre-COVID, we were a $1.6 billion annual business, 80% of which came from the fees paid by the users of the JCC. So we were 80% self-sufficient, meaning that only 20 cents on the dollar was coming from any funding source other than the paying customer. Mm-hmm. It's not a surprise at all, therefore, the JCC executives and JCC management and board said our primary responsibility is to serve the paying customer. They provide most of the funding. Much of Jewish life is driven by the intentional outcomes required by funders and philanthropists. But if they are only a minority factor and they're not pumping significant investment, they can't hold institutions accountable to the outcomes that they're desiring to fund. It's the paying customer that holds the institution accountable, and therefore the institution's job is to deliver to the customer satisfaction. And satisfaction is not the same as intentional, measurable Jewish outcomes in the pursuit of greater Jewish community. And I would add one other element here, and you'll forgive my sort of running on with this philosophizing that I'm doing. I grew up in a suburb of New York, where being a Jewishly engaged family included membership in a synagogue, my parents' participation in UJA Federation, my mother's participation in Hadassah. We went to the JCC for day camp. The kids were involved in Beitar or Young Judea. We had maybe 7 different touch points with Jewish life. Fast forward to the similar suburban area that I live now, where I raise my own children, and consider the relative level of participation in all of those other things. Synagogue membership outside of Orthodoxy in this area has cratered. Maybe it's 25% of what it was. The number of people who contribute to the annual campaigns of Federation, the former UJA, is less than 1/3 of what it was a generation ago. The Hadassahs and ZOAs and B'nai B'riths of the world are largely shadows of their former selves. On and on we go. Only one institution in the area is still serving a similar number, if not a greater number of people today than it was a generation ago, and that's the Jewish Community Center. So if there was a time in which JCCs could responsibly say, we have a complementary role to play, we share responsibility for the Jewish future with all of these partners, and each is pulling their weight. That remains true, except as a result of the declining levels of engagement, our role has increased proportionately. And now I would say we have a disproportionate responsibility, not just to be part of the coalition, but to be the engine that drives it. JCCs have the ability to be an open source platform for collaboration and partnership with all of these other players in institutional Jewish life, and can begin to author a directional shift in the way Jewish community functions, with a unique and fundamental commitment to measurably greater Jewish community and more vibrant Jewish life, where we say, together with the leaders of the communities in which we serve, here are the 5 ways we could quantifiably measure whether we're having a positive impact on Jewish life over a 3, 5, 10-year period. And we're ready to sign up to be held accountable for moving the needle on those things. That way, we can say we are part of a collaborative commitment to something more, and not simply to being the best possible version of ourselves. That model has not seen North American Jewish life grow and evolve in recent years. We are scuffling with our prosperity in this extraordinary moment in Jewish history. The community is not getting visibly stronger. We're doing our best to hold on to what we've got, and that to me is not sufficient as a mission for a major player in Jewish life.
So how do you implement, you've touched on some large issues here and talked about the centrality of the JCC, the unique opportunities that JCC have to be conveners of the community, and not only that, but to take a leading role based on the fact that they can be neutral ground, or are seen as neutral ground, are drawing upon all aspects of the community, are growing, haven't been, in terms of membership, taking these hits the way other organizations are. How do you make, is this your vision? Is this the vision of the movement? How do you make that happen on individual JCC levels? Is this going on in communities? Is this something that's JCC association led by you? Is this led from the bottom up, that you're seeing this from the individual JCCs around the continent?
Jonathan, I don't know whether over the course of my entire career I've ever had a really good original idea. But I do consider myself to be a good judge of original ideas. And when I see them elsewhere, I can identify those that are worth championing. What I'm describing is taking place in different locations across the North American Jewish landscape in ways that have been significantly amplified during the period of COVID-19 and the pandemic, where out of a necessity to support communities in crisis and community members in crisis, Jewish organizations and institutions reached across lines that were typically viewed as competitive to join hands to try to do something better. And I'll give you a handful of examples. The Lawrence Family JCC in San Diego had a problem in the summer of 2020, in that the county had made busing something that would not receive the approval of public health authorities in a COVID climate. When it came to the day camping season, people who couldn't get their kids onto a bus to go to the JCC, who lived too far away, were at risk of not being able to send their kids to camp at a time when childcare and a summer camp experience were in greater need perhaps than in a typical year. The JCC reached out to congregations in the area who were shuttered also as a result of COVID to see whether arrangements could be made to bring JCC day camp programs to the outdoor facilities of shuttered synagogues in order to bring camp closer to families and make it possible for families to be able to drop off and pick up their kids at places close enough to home. And as a result, the network impact of JCC camps expanded. The synagogues gained revenue from renting out their facilities, and the synagogues also benefited from having foot traffic of families who would otherwise not have gone to the synagogue for any reason, suddenly becoming acquainted with another community engine. And as a byproduct of the good work that was done in 20, collaborative programs began to be seeded during the last academic year and were renewed in this summer. That's one example. Last year's high holidays, and here we are amidst the Chagim again, found 60 JCCs playing host to high holiday services for nearby congregations whose buildings were closed. The Jays had opened. They had created guidelines for responsible operation from a public health standpoint for intake and separation and traffic flow and PPE and all of the things that they needed to do. And they invited area congregations to convene on their properties in ways that they would otherwise not have been able to convene. We joined hands in New York and in JCCs across the field with Jewish Family Service and social and human service agencies to take programs that used to provide meals to seniors inside the JCC on a daily basis to a modest number of people to become meal production and delivery mechanisms that geometrically larger numbers of people would benefit from. So we went from, for example, in one JCC in Queens, from serving 500 meals in person a week to delivering 45,000 meals a week in partnership with other Jewish agencies. And I can give you more and more examples of things that are happening across the country, but let me give you one that's not COVID related. At the Siegel JCC in Wilmington, Delaware, there is a weekly tradition that the 4 congregational rabbis of Wilmington, and there are only 4 synagogues in town, all come to celebrate Shabbat with the early childhood program at the Siegel JCC every Friday. And the families of the children in the program are invited. So this is a case where congregational Jewry and community-centered Jewry understand that they have an aligned opportunity to bring the strength of clergy and congregational Jewish life into the JCC as a partner in the JCC's commitment to providing a communal celebration of Shabbat. We have the JCC in Palo Alto working with the Binah Secular Yeshiva out of Israel to do all-night Shavuot study at an outdoor shopping mall every year. We've got the JCC of Baltimore hosting an annual Sukkot picnic party celebration for 6,000 Jews in partnership with the congregations and other Jewish organizations in Baltimore. You have the JCC in Pittsburgh that piloted several years ago a program that would provide a community celebration of Rosh Hashanah and a community marking of Yom Kippur on the afternoons of the high holidays at a time that would not compete with high holiday services of the local synagogues, in expectation that there were some number of people in the community who were not marking the holiday at all as a result of the fact that they don't go to shul and there was no other option out there for them. And they had hundreds of people who came out each and every day, and they've renewed this process now for the last several years. About half of the people who come out were in shul in the morning, about half weren't in shul in the morning. And it is not a religious service. It is I would call it a philosophical marking, a cultural, a communal marking of the start of the new year, not with prayer, but with coming together around the themes of the high holidays. All of these are examples of collaborations between sworn competitors, or in some cases, people who said very clearly, the starting and ending point of the JCC is here, synagogues take over here, social services take over here, the Federation is responsible for stirring the pot over here. What we have been curating since before the start of COVID is opportunities to amplify the remarkable impact that happens when we link elbows, and instead of viewing one another as competitors for scarce anything, We rather view ourselves as allies or partners in the pursuit of something greater to which we can all collaboratively aspire. And the last point I'll make on this is, how often do we think in terms of my donors, my board members, my staff, my families that are part of my whatever enterprise may be? I think we have lost track of the fact that none of the people we describe as belonging somehow to us would define themselves in the least bit as feeling that sense of belonging. We're the only ones that have that illusion that these folks are mine in some way. The recognition that we are theirs, and only by their good graces and continued interest and patronage can we remain theirs. Will help us to see that we actually need, again, to find allies and partners to link elbows. And because the JCCs are the community's most significant real estate and largest gathering point, we are uniquely positioned to catalyze that kind of collaboration and partnership to greater effect.
Amen. Doron, as part of an organization that's had the honor and privilege to partner with both individual JCCs across the U.S. And around the world. I know you're a big, you and JCC Association are big supporters of JCC Global and all that we're doing there. But to be able to partner with both with you and with JCC Association, with Ride for the Living, with Holocaust Survivor Day, I think we firsthand have seen very closely the power of the movement and how you've reinvigorated the umbrella organization, which people see from the top down what you're about, and it's something inspiring, and I feel that I understand why everybody involved in the movement is so happy to have you. That we didn't get a chance to get to. I'm very mindful of your time. I would love it if you would come back and really get into certain issues about the role of the synagogue versus JCC and the international JCC, the connecting JCCs around the world, and a bunch of things that I would love to at a certain point in the future maybe grab you to do a part two. But I just have a couple closing questions. One, are you on Team Latko or Team Hamantash?
I don't know. I think it depends on the day. I'd like to be on both of those teams.
Fair enough. Good answer. And I always ask people, and they always hate the question, what are your 3 favorite films?
Wow. That is a fantastic, that's a fantastic question. And I don't have a reflective answer for you. But I'll offer these. I'm a big Aaron Sorkin fan, and his first big hit was called The American President, and it became the trigger for the start of The West Wing, which is my favorite television show of all time. So I would say The American President. I'm also a big Tolkien fan, so the Lord of the Rings movies, as a collection, I would say, are among my very favorite. And the third one, I do have an answer. The third one is the movie musical 1776, which was about the Continental Congress and the Declaration of Independence, the founding of the United States of America. So you can see there's a bit of a theme that runs through there about ideology and patriotism and commitment to something greater than ourselves.
Doron Krakow, an incredible pleasure to spend this time with you. Shana Tova, wishing you all the best, you and your family, and especially your son and his bride. And that's what wonderful news to hear. And we are excited to work as much as possible with you and to do great things together.
Gentlemen, you'll forgive me for taking one more second of personal privilege, and that's to extend my gratitude to you. If there is anything that I have discovered in this remarkable 4-year period, is that we are made greater by the contributions of each of the individual enterprises that constitute our movement. So whether it's 170 J's across North America or the hundreds of other JCCs that exist in different places around the world, we are greater for their contributions, and the JCC of Krakow has made unique and notable contributions through programs, events, and activities, through its impact, and I say very proudly through its leadership. I am honored and proud to count you as my colleagues and my partners, my mentors, and perhaps most especially my friends. And I wish you only continued success and prosperity. And I see that my screen is frozen here, so I hope you're still hearing me. But I would leave you with a Gemar Chatima Tova. May we have the opportunity to do ever greater things in the new year.
Amen.
Amen.
Beautiful.
Be well, my friend.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye bye now.
Shana Tova, everybody.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.